Hey everybody, I'm Zach.
And I'm Jesse.
And you're watching In Depth.
On Now You Know. This episode of In Depth is brought to you by EcoWear. If you like the shirts that Zach and I are wearing and you want to get some for yourself, and you just wish that those shirts were also carbon offset, and you wish for every order you place that we planted a tree or something and we also helped cap a well, then you should head over to ecowear.us where all of those things are true.
And we're brought to you by abetterrouteplanner.com, our favorite EV trip planner with waypoints. Use our link in the show notes below to get a 30-day free trial to the A Better Route Planner premium app. Plan your next EV trip with abetterrouteplanner.com.
And we're sponsored by BigBattery.com, with the best battery prices in the USA guaranteed. If you've got something you need to power, from homes to cars, RVs to boats, and much more, Big Battery has you covered, offering the newest in battery tech. Use the code NOWYOUKNOW to save 5% off your purchases today at BigBattery.com.
And this episode is sponsored by Morning Brew.
Morning Brew, we're doing coffee now?
No. So Morning Brew is a daily email newsletter that's delivered right to your email inbox every morning.
Newsletter? Oh, come on. Do you know how full my inbox is every day? How much I already have to deal with?
Hang on, take it easy. I hear you. I got way too much email to deal with too. But see, that's why I like Morning Brew.
Why? Because you're a masochist?
No, because Morning Brew gets me up to speed on what's going on in the world so that I'm ready for my day, all in just 5 minutes.
Let me see that. Oh, okay.
You see, you get all your business news, brews, bets, what else is brewing, finance, pharma, social media.
And I can quickly drill down deeper if I want to.
Right. It's easy to read and it's free.
It's free?
Yeah. Just go to the link in the description. It takes less than 15 seconds. That's it.
All right. I got to give this a try.
All right. We can start each morning in the office reading Morning Brew together. All right, we're about to show you a small piece of a longer interview we did with the CEO of a company called Solar Window. Now, just a disclaimer, I bought stock in Solar Window a few years ago, and I've been buying more recently.
Zach and I are not financial advisors. You should not take anything we or our guests are saying as financial advice. Always do your own research.
Now, I believe this is one of the first in-depth interviews that Solar Window has done on camera, so I hope you enjoy it.
And I want to get right to the interview because I think you're going to find it fascinating. If you want to see the whole interview, you can watch that now. You should see a card pop over here, or you can head over to the Disruptive Investing channel by clicking the link down below in the show notes.
All right, so I'm so lucky to have with me today the CEO and chairman of Solar Window, Jatinder Bhogal, or I think you've been nice enough to let us call you Jay.
Thank you.
So Jay, tell me, before we get into the whole scoop or whatever, I'd love to know a little bit of background about you and how you joined Solar Window.
I've been involved with Solar Window since inception, since the very beginning. And at the time, there was a research scientist who had approached a group of investors, and I was in the room at the time. And he had this idea of having a patient ingest silicon nanoparticles, which would photoluminesce. In other words, if you could imagine almost like tiny little fireflies that you would ingest, and somehow this was going to help with medical imaging. And while the idea itself just seemed like a spectacular departure from anything that was out there, we were a little perplexed, and it just didn't quite add up and didn't make a lot of sense that you had these tiny particles that were really generating electricity that could pass through the blood-brain barrier. God knows what would happen if you had electrical charges going off in your brain. We actually stepped away from it, and it never came back for some time. And then all of a sudden, in fact, our lead investor came back and he said, what would happen if we took this material, which appears to be transparent in many ways, what would happen if we just poured it on a piece of glass? And it was perhaps some of that naivete on our part, and it was some of the serendipity, I think. And just good old-fashioned good luck, running into an opportunity, perhaps repurposing that core discovery that this one scientist happened to have, and thinking to ourselves, maybe we could do something different. And from that, the idea of what we used to call back then a nano power window was born. And of course, today with Solar Window, we're now much different company. We've formalized a little bit, certainly come a long way since the early days, and have discovered, I think, some really exciting ways of applying what we call liquid electricity to flexible plastics, to glass. And our mission, as you know, is to turn ordinary surfaces into electricity generating products. And I think we're well on our way to doing that.
what an interesting beginning for something that seems almost so simple sounding compared to something that's going to go into your bloodstream. What is Solar Window, and like how does it actually work?
Solar Window, and it's a bit of a misnomer because I think oftentimes most of us have the impression that that as a company we've set out to ambitiously turn skyscraper windows into electricity generating glass, which is part and parcel of what we're aiming to do. And that was certainly our motivation, I think, at the beginning. And we're no different than any company, any technology that I think evolves from a core foundational technology to then evolving to becoming a product. What we've developed is a platform that allows for plastics, glass, whether rigid or flexible, to suddenly start generating electricity and do it using an organic coating, earth-abundant materials. And what's absolutely brilliant, and I credit our scientists, our engineers, our folks that really have had the vision, what we've developed is a coating that's 1/100th the thickness of a human hair. There's approximately 4 or 5 layers that we apply. This is all proprietary. We have, I think now, just going off the top of my head, around 120 patent claims around the world, in the United States, throughout Europe, in China and elsewhere. We have another 200. This company's in motion. We have another 200 or so that are currently in process. And what our technology allows you to do is to take this organic material, organic liquid coating, apply it to these different surfaces, and suddenly you have electricity generating on those surfaces. What this means is that you no longer need to strap a solar panel onto the rooftop of a car in order to contemplate the idea of an electricity generating vehicle. You no longer need to think of a very heavy, cumbersome, albeit I think highly efficient and increasingly efficient conventional solar panel that may contain, for example, toxic metals, heavy lead and other materials that I think most of us are trying to get away from. And instead, if you can visualize surfaces that we've never seen generating electricity before, including indoors, these are places where solar has never been able to go before. And if I can be so bold, if we turn the clock back a little bit and you think about your cell phone, and if you think of the early days of the cell phone, and most of us would think, well, why do I need a phone? And you'd ponder that for a minute. And I think, Zach, what you'd say to yourself is, I need a phone so I can make a phone call. And then someone had the brilliant idea of saying, wait a second, if you're going to make a phone call, let's add a directory to it so you can actually find the phone numbers, right? And then someone said, hold on a second, what if we put a camera in this thing? And most folks of my generation turned around and said, what kind of craziness is that? Who puts a phone with a camera? This is lunacy. It's unnecessary. When I want a camera, I go get my camera. In other words, we never perceived the need for having this concept of mobility, this ability to capture moments in our lives, to recall these moments, this ability to actually have photography and memories available to us in our hand, in the palm of our hand. And likewise, I think a lot of us, me included, for the longest time, never imagined that the walls in our living room, that the boardroom tables in our offices, that these surfaces could potentially be generating electricity. Never imagined that. Perhaps we've never contemplated that with the electromobility movement, with the idea of autonomous vehicles coming before us, the very concept of having potentially a non-hackable power source that could potentially be able to immediately provide signaling, emergency GPS, emergency response could be activated through this direct form of electrification that could be powered from the sunroof of the car. The ability to extend the driving range of a vehicle, of a big rig, of a truck. These are things that we've perhaps contemplated more as science fiction, and now they've become science fact. So when you ask, what's the implication, or where do we go with solar window and with liquid electricity, I see us moving far beyond the concept of electrifying the glass on buildings, although certainly it's a very compelling business proposition, and it's one that we continue to pursue. I find at the same time it's important to remember that what we have is a product that's evolved far beyond a single product concept for a building, and has now really evolved to become a platform technology.
So
Wow.
this is, yeah,
You got our attention.
my mind is unfolding as to the ideas of what you could do. So, essentially you have a coating, and it's transparent, which is nice because you can put it on windows. Let's just say I want to take a concrete wall, southern facing on my house or something like that. Can I just get a can of this magic stuff and just slop it on there, and then just attach a couple wires? I'm sure it's a little bit more involved than that, right?
Absolutely. This is a complex chemistry. I mean, what we're doing is advanced material sciences, and if you were to strip away the sizzle, and if you were to uncover the steak, what's the secret sauce here behind what we do? It's a combination of the application. First of all, it's the formulation of these coatings. It's knowing what characteristics we need to be prevalent in these coatings so they can be applied in certain ways. And that's a second part. The coatings on their own are no different than, for example, having you could have the cure to cancer, but if you can't put it in a syringe or if you can't deliver it to the patient, it's not really doing much sitting in the vial. So I think in many ways, I see our liquid electricity the same way. Yes, we can have a liquid coating. It's actually the processes through which we lay it down that makes it a complete product. One aspect of your question, though, I think is really cool. When you mentioned south facing, and let me start, if I can. So why is it that you picked south facing for your question, for your illustration?
Well, making the assumption that we're in the northern hemisphere, you get the most sun exposure, anything that's southern facing, because the sun is usually in the southern half of the sky, right?
Makes absolute sense for conventional solar. It makes absolute sense. One of the advantages we have is that unlike conventional solar, which of course, as you know, is dependent upon the angle of irradiance of the sun, and again, I don't want to knock conventional solar because I think that's, we stand on the shoulders of giants that have come before us, and this is one of those giants. We wouldn't be doing what we're doing if it wasn't for the cadmium tellurides and the SIGs and the amorphous silicons and the polycrystallines and everybody else that's come before us. At the same time, every technology has its advantages. They all have some gaps and opportunities, and I think we are able to fill in some of these gaps. So to your illustration about the south-facing wall, one of the advantages we have is that we can actually function from dawn to dusk. Well, why is that important? Well, it means that we do not need direct sunlight. Instead, we're actually able to work from reflected light, indirect light. So by the way, what's reflected light for some of our audience that may not know? I didn't know, someone had to show me. So if you can imagine two buildings that are next to each other, and if we can just visualize how the light would bounce off of one tower to the other, that's reflected light. The advantage we have is not only do we function in natural sunlight, direct natural sunlight, but also indirect light, reflected light. We even work indoors. Each of these applications will have their advantages and disadvantages, and of course, maximum power that can be derived, and then lower power. Nonetheless, what it does is this opportunity through our liquid electricity opens up applications and electricity generation where it's never been available to us before. So I would just say that while we've traditionally contemplated south-facing as our opportunity, I think what we can look at now is east, west, north, south, two buildings against each other where there's just a little bit of light and so on. To get back to your question, how would we actually apply this to one of the walls on the outside of your home or on the outside of a building? And I think a good application just for us to contemplate is a warehouse, for example. And there's an application where you do not need transparency per se. And by the way, non-transparency is our friend. It's always going to be our friend. We have to accept the fact that the more light we're able to absorb, the more energy we can absorb from light, the more power we're going to be able to generate. Traditionally, rooftop systems on warehousing have played a very important role, and I think they've done a great job. However, we have oftentimes thousands and thousands of square feet around the perimeter of the building, the walls. And because they're vertical, and because the sun just does not hit them at the right angle, these panels are simply unable to produce enough power to make them financially feasible. And that's one of the advantages we have is we're not dependent upon this angle of irradiance dynamic that we have in conventional solar. I hope that helps.
I think a lot of people kind of want to get some numbers, though. They want to wrap their head around this. And I know that on your website, I saw something about that if you had a building, it would be possible to get 50 times more power out of solar window system than it would be to put traditional solar on the roof. And that really caught me because I was like, what? So could you explain, I mean, did I read that right? Is that possible?
So yes, you did read it right. I think all of us need to take one step back for just a minute. So if this was a skyscraper, this was a 40-story building, we have the guys, the Panasonics, the GEs, the First Solars who are basically battling over the rooftop. So on a 40-story building, you have roughly 3,000 square feet of usable space. And I'm being quite liberal with that number. Don't forget, you have HVAC systems. Oftentimes you want to put gyms, rooftop bars, and so on. So it may not be available. Let's assume it is. You have 3,000 square feet of rooftop space to put conventional solar, which is going to work somewhere, depending on your geography, between 2.5 to 4 hours per day, depending on the angle of irradiance of the sun. 3,000 square feet, we have 6 acres of glass on the same building. And let's go a step further. The other advantage we have is we're solution processable. We're liquid. This is so important. If you can visualize for a moment a half a teaspoon of liquid poured onto a piece of glass that's 3 feet by 3 feet. So if you have a 3 foot by 3 foot dimension, we need roughly half a teaspoon of our liquid coatings in order to generate power, meaningful power. By the way, in our independent modeling, what we've been able to demonstrate is that you have a 1-year financial payback. That's the key. And I think, Jesse, you talked about that earlier, where folks are fixated on how much power do I get. I think building owners are fixated on how quickly does it pay for itself. I think that's what really matters to them. And this is our value proposition. It's the fact that we don't need to manufacture under conditions which add tremendous cost. That's the advantage of having liquid coatings. And as you know, ultimately chemistry is cheap. It's the development of that chemistry that's expensive, but once you produce that chemistry, it's a very low cost value proposition in the manufacturing cycle.
So we've heard recently about Apple and Hyundai. They've supposedly working together on Apple's new autonomous car, and it gets me thinking here that if you can use solar window on a building, is it possible that this would be a good use on an autonomous vehicle?
Automotive vehicles, autonomous vehicles, mass transit, buses, for example, offer us a tremendous amount of rooftop space. Believe it or not, recreational vehicles are another market that I think is largely overlooked. Marine applications are another. High-speed rail, and of course aerospace and air travel is another major market for us that I think is entirely untapped that we should be getting behind.
Sounds like solar window is going to work great on buildings. It's going to work great on transportation of all kinds, ships and cars and trains. Is there any other place that solar window could work that I'm not thinking of right now?
That's a great question, and I'm always surprised because we get calls, for example. Some of our biggest supporters, of course, are our stockholders, and we get calls all the time from folks in telecom, decision makers in different industries. And as I was mentioning earlier, one of the areas that I think I had put aside for a long time was extraterrestrial, was space applications. I think some of the aeronautical applications that we've always known have held some promise for us, but they were a little bit backburnered. We didn't know quite how to approach them from an engineering perspective. I think in the past few years, we've had some important validation of our technology and of our approach that opens a doorway to, for example, aircraft, commercial aircraft, opens a doorway to space vehicles. And one of the aspects of space travel that we sometimes forget, we all think of folks being in space and everything's weightless. And I think that's kind of the image we have. What we forget is that the average payload costs around $10,000 per pound. Well, you see where the dynamics suddenly shift. $10,000 a pound is really, really heavy and really expensive for putting a source of energy up in space. And if we can do this, rather than doing it for pounds, do it in ounces, bring the cost from hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars down to numbers that make economic sense or even more feasible. And on top of that, if we can provide electrification to surfaces that have not been electrified before, it becomes a game changer. And that's I think these are some of the areas that we did not traditionally consider, but you may have heard us starting to talk about this a little bit more in the past I'd say 12 or 18 months.
So I'm just thinking of the Mars base, and of course it's got the dome over it, and usually it's got the big giant solar field with robots cleaning off all the solar panels of the Martian dust. The dome itself could now be generating the electricity, and all the buildings and the vehicles inside the dome and outside the dome.
Well, and to your question though, so I mean, this is a transparent coating, or it can be, and I've seen some video and pictures on your website, and we're probably seeing some now. And this looks great because in most applications, like an office, you don't need 100% transparency. In fact, a little bit of sun shading could be good. But like, let's say I wanted to have a greenhouse with plants in it. Is it possible to coat my windows on the roof with this? Will enough sunlight get through to my plants to grow them, or is it really going to take too much power away?
What a wonderful question. My God, I'm loving you guys more and more. The agrivoltaic sector, as they call it, and it's an emerging market. The idea of providing electrification to agriculture is a relatively new concept. Dr. Xavier Serrat in Spain, who's one of the world's foremost authorities on plant growth and plant biology and the impact of light on plant growth. He's been working with us for some time. And one of the things that excites Xavi so much is that there's this interesting dynamic that happens with plant growth. First of all, in short, does solar window have the promise of electrifying greenhouses? The short answer is yes. The nuance to it is that while most of us think about plant growth in terms of optimizing the yield of plants, there are certain applications of plants where you actually want larger leaves to flourish and grow rather than simply more volume of plant. So a good example is the spinach industry. And studies have been done, in fact, they were just published last year, where if you can actually reduce the amount of light, the leaves naturally grow bigger because they're trying to grow. And they do what nature intends them to do, which is let me increase my surface area so that I can bring more nourishment into myself. And of course, if you're going down to the supermarket and you see two bunches of spinach, one has larger leaves and the other doesn't, you're probably going to buy the one that has. So the agricultural market for us is very exciting. There are opportunities, I think, in Northern Hemisphere markets. There are opportunities in new emerging markets, especially where greenhouse applications and greenhouse growth and the greenhouse industry is starting to really come into its own. But we're super excited about this, along with, I think, high efficiency lighting systems that have been introduced into the agrivoltaic sector, which have really turned this into a science as much as an art form. So we see it as a very exciting application. Thank you for bringing that up.
All right, there is so much more to this interview. Jay is such a smart guy, and there is so much more to learn about the company and this technology. So if you want to watch the whole video, you can click here or click the link in the show notes below.
And it's because of our subscribers that we were able to land this interview.
Yeah, I reached out to Solar Window a few times over the past few years with pretty much no response back. But now that we've grown, and because Jay is a fan, we were able to snag this interview for you. So by clicking on the subscribe button, you're actually helping this channel to grow and help us to get you more cool content.
And I mean, I really think that this technology could be huge.
Yeah. I mean, you need to watch the whole interview because there's so much more here to unpack. I mean, the company has been working on this tech for 10 years, and now they have the IP, and it sounds like they have the production partners to make this a reality. A low-cost, high-volume solar solution that works not only in direct sunlight, but in indirect lighting.
So yeah, this is definitely a company that's going to be on my radar in the coming weeks and months, and I definitely urge you to watch that full interview if you have the time. Maybe head over there now, put it into a watch later playlist, so that way you can just watch it later when you have more time. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week.
Now you know.